Yesterday, there was a presidential debate in the United States of America. Oh boy, Donald Trump and Joe Biden took the stage to rant at each other and be completely incoherent messes, and it seems like Joe Biden may have been the much worse mess. To the point where people on CNN were like crying and suggesting he should be replaced as the head of the ticket, which is not good 4 months from the election. So we'll see how all of that shakes out, but needless to say, it was a very bad night for the person I would have to consider my guy because I am of a more liberal orientation. However, that's kind of boring. I mean, we all know presidential politics really just sucks. It's not worth talking about usually, and I only had to mention it because it just happened and people are obviously freaking out. So let's talk about something else. Let's return to our favorite golden boy, abnormally sized Nikolai, who had some thoughts on Donald Trump being convicted of 34 felonies. Let's just check it out. Let's see what he has to say and see what we can say about it.
As some of you may have heard, Trump was just convicted in a court in New York, and this is all over the news. This is a big deal. Now, you may be wondering, well, what does this have to do with Christianity? What does this have to do with the Bible? It actually has a lot to do with the Bible, and today we're going to break down in detail why this Trump conviction is a divine sign from God that he is judging America.
You know, funnily enough, I've actually read the Bible more than once, and for some reason, I guess I must be reading like the wrong translation because I can't find Donald Trump, the United States of America, New York, or any of this stuff in the Bible. It's just not there. It turns out the Bible doesn't have a lot to say about American politics. Who would have imagined a 2,000-year-old book would have nothing to say about a country that wouldn't exist for another 1,700 plus years?
By handing America over to political tyranny.
I hate to cut in so quickly because I know people don't like it, but I feel like there are at least a couple of things that should be said now. The first is that Big Nick isn't much of an understander of anything. I mean, I can't name one subject that he spoke about where I was like, wow, Big Nick spitting facts here. No, it's always, wow, this has to be among the most delusional things I've ever heard a person say. For example, his latest video is about Leviathan being found on Google Maps. He doesn't seem to understand Christianity, which would normally be fine. I mean, he did come from a Hindu background, but for the fact that he has an apologetics channel dedicated to teaching other people about Christianity, which he doesn't understand. Obviously, the man doesn't have a critical thinking bone in his entire body, which, hey, this is the internet age, baby. It seems like most people don't anymore. Politics. Obviously, not a politics understander. He thinks this is tyranny, that Donald Trump is being unfairly prosecuted for illegally spending his campaign money to pay off a porn star. The kind of thing that if Joe Biden did it, they would be calling for him to be taken to Guantanamo Bay. But that's neither here nor there. I just want to point out one extra thing regarding all of this. He thinks Joe Biden, a very feeble elderly man, which was just proven yesterday at the debate, is a communist dictator along the likes of Xi Jinping or Mao Zedong or Joseph Stalin or any number of gnarly, nasty figures throughout history. I think he ignores the historical context because he doesn't understand history. In this case, I'm talking about all the coups America has been involved in defending what it believed to be its own interests over the last 100 years. Now, there are extensive lists of coups America has been involved in. Most of them led to something akin to a military dictatorship or a fascist dictatorship. Very rarely, if ever, did they lead to anything remotely resembling democracy, and I think it was folly for everyone to just pretend that would never make its way back to America. Now, Big Nick thinks it's Joe Biden, which is a joke. I would think it's the guy that tried to overturn election results he disagreed with based on a conspiracy. Straight up, just a conspiracy. But hey, he exhausted his legal avenues and accepted defeat. No, he tried to have people overrun the Capitol. So great work there. That right there, that's your wannabe dictator, strongman. That's the guy. He's not a freedom lover like you seem to think. Of course, we know what they mean when they say freedom. But I digress. The point I'm just making is this. Big Nick doesn't understand anything, and I think that will become increasingly apparent if you just happen to stumble upon this video and you've never seen anything by him or about him before. Lucky you.
But before we get into the biblical breakdown of why this is all happening, let's get into the intro. What's going on, guys? It's Big Nick back for another video. Thank you guys so much for coming back to the channel today.
Oh, Big Nick, how could we ever resist staring once more into the eye of madness?
Before we get into today's video, if you guys like Christian content, please give this video a like, subscribe to my channel down below if you are new, and turn on my post notifications so you never miss a new video.
And if you hate Christian content, do all of those things here.
Without further ado, let's get into it. Former President Donald Trump has just been convicted of 34 counts of supposedly falsifying business records, and the spiritual agenda behind this trial is more biblical than you think. Donald Trump has been a political opponent against the satanic deep state shadow government that has been destroying America from within since he ran for president in 2016.
Multiple citations needed. Please, Nick, cite your sources.
As you can see, our country has been clearly under attack with our economy, our border crisis, as well as the decaying morality of the nation that's a result of abandoning the principles of the Bible. Now you may be wondering, why is this Donald Trump trial so biblically significant, and what is God trying to tell us? For those who have discernment, we can clearly see that this trial is a complete perversion of the justice system here in America.
You know, I've said it before and I'll say it many times again in the future, no doubt. Discernment is not something I would associate with Big Nick. In what regard has he ever shown anything remotely resembling discernment?
And has opened the portal for demonic tyranny to plague the nation. Regardless if you're a Democrat or a Republican, that is not the issue at hand. Although I identify as a conservative, both the Democratic and the Republican Party have abandoned God completely.
Whenever somebody assures you that this isn't an issue of Democrats or Republicans, they're lying or they're just wrong. Because pretty much everything in America is. I mean, there are some rare crossover points, but is Donald Trump really an innocent man convicted falsely is not one of them. That's a pretty partisan thing at this point because that's how politics works now. Of course, Fox News was literally created with the intent of never allowing a Nixon to happen again. Nixon, as I'm sure you all know, was indeed about to be thrown out because he orchestrated the theft of documents from the opposition party, which was very bad. And Roger Ailes circulated a memo suggesting that they create some kind of a conservative news network, so that could never happen again. And, of course, who is Big Nick listening to today? Probably Fox News, probably Newsmax. And the whole argument, this isn't about Democrats and Republicans, it's nonsense. I mean, he obviously blatantly attributes to one party in particular more than the other all of the things he sees as bad about the world. I mean, he thinks that this is a setup by the Democrats to get at Trump, who is, by the way, a Republican. Who is going to be passing Donald Trump's legislation if he wins another term? Is it going to be Democrat? No, it's going to be Republicans. Of course, Big Nick is just like lying here. He's being disingenuous. Big Nick is a Republican. He supports Republicans. He doesn't think they've abandoned God, or else he wouldn't support him.
So let me make this clear. This is not a right-wing video or a pro-Trump video. This is a pro-God video explaining to you what's going on from a spiritual lens. This trial was rigged from the beginning, where radical leftist juries and prosecutors were appointed to convict him in a radical leftist state that has heavy bias against conservatives. Many legal experts have even been on record to call this trial disgraceful, and not even a trial, but more so a political attack at the hands of the opposing party.
You know, I've seen a whole lot of Big Nick since I started this channel. A whole lot more than I would have ever wanted to, a whole lot more than anybody should ever have to. So I like to think I have pretty good knowledge about Big Nick and his videos, and I'm a Big Nick understander. But that last clip there is really one of the most incredible, shameless, self-serving things I've seen from Big Nick, and I think that's saying something. He says, this is not a right-wing video. This is not a pro-Trump video. This is a pro-God video where I'm going to show you the truth through a spiritual lens. Then he doesn't do that. He does something completely different. He goes on about how it's radical left this, radical left that, legal scholars this. What does that have to do with the spiritual lens exactly? I would like to know. Somebody solve this puzzle for me, because I I am puzzled.
Trump was taken to trial for an affair that he had back in 2006, where he ended up paying hush money to an adult film star to keep quiet about their relationship, about a decade later when she started making commotion about it before he ran for president. Now, ethically speaking, paying someone to be quiet about your adulterous affair is a sin, but legally speaking, here in America, it is not worthy of a conviction to be a registered felon because of it.
First of all, even the headlines that Big Nick showed a second ago sort of dispute what he is saying. He is saying that Donald Trump was convicted of 34 felonies just because he gave money to a porn star to keep her quiet. No, that's not what happened. What happened is he paid her illegally and then had the business records falsified knowingly. There was a paper trail that led directly to him. He was caught red-handed, smoking gun and everything. That's what happened here, and yes, that is illegal.
The trial claims that he falsified business records during this transaction of paying this woman off to be quiet about the affair, but anyone who paid close attention to this case knows that that's just a complete lie.
Raise your hand if you honest to God believe that Big Nick has actually followed this case in more than just like memes and stuff. Raise your hand if you think Big Nick has read so much as a single document related to the conviction of Donald Trump.
This phony trial here in America is a bigger deal than you realize, because for the first time in American history, we have witnessed a communist-style takedown of a political opponent in a country that used to be known as the land of the free. This act of injustice is brewing tensions for a civil war here in America, and this is a direct response from God that we are being judged for abandoning our covenant that we made with him.
You gotta appreciate how skilled Nick is with the gish gallop, because you let him cook for like 30 seconds, it snowballs, and you've got like 20 different claims that you would have to take, 15 minutes debunking. So let's just focus on that very last one, where America had some covenant with God. What is that? Well, it turns out I actually know exactly what that is. There is a pseudo-historian named David Barton. David Barton used to go on Glenn Beck back when Glenn Beck was on Fox News. If you're too young to remember that, ouch, I'm old. But David Barton said that the Founding Fathers had a covenant with God for some reason. To, if we can be your chosen ones, we'll always be yours. Bad covenant to make in retrospect, but it never happened. It's fake. It never happened. He made it up. And there's no evidence for it whatsoever. But at least we have at least one window into the kinds of stuff Big Nick is listening to. He just totally rejects anything remotely mainstream as it regards history or religion or anything else, and just goes with the craziest of crazies.
Tensions are more high than ever, with the left and the right being very divided. But this is very similar to the Old Testament documentation of the Kingdom of Israel. When we look at the Bible, we see division leading to civil wars as a direct response from God indicating his judgment, due to the disobedience of his commands. The Kingdom of Israel was established by God as a result of his promise to the people that he would lead them out of slavery in Egypt to the Promised Land, with an intention that Israel would be a holy nation that would represent God's goodness and love to other countries around it.
I'm always astounded, amazed, confused when conservatives say something like, America has never been so divided. Like, hey, have you ever heard of slavery before? Anyway, Big Nick is about to go on a long one about the Kingdom of Israel. Solomon, David, Saul, all that good stuff. And frankly, I don't know if I will include that. So when you watch this video, that may not be in there. But just wanted to give you that context regardless, because boy, is he about to go for it.
For this nation to experience harmony, God established a covenant by giving the 10 Commandments to Moses on Mount Sinai. The first 2 commandments set the boundaries for God's relationship with Israel. He states in Exodus 21-3, "You shall have no other gods before me, and you shall make no idols." God gave many opportunities to be faithful, but the Israelites continued to disobey for over 40 years until they finally reached the Promised Land. Once they entered the Promised Land, they wanted an earthly king rather than God to be their king, which he allowed in 1 Samuel 8:21 with the word that he spoke to Samuel the prophet. God appointed King Saul, who ended up failing to obey God and ended up being a very wicked king in the end. So instead, God removed King Saul and appointed King David, who was a man after God's heart. After David's reign, God appointed David's son, Solomon, to be king over Israel, who God greatly loved and even appeared to Solomon in a dream, promising to give him wisdom as well as wealth and honor, which Solomon did not ask for. Solomon was the wisest king to ever live, but even with all of the blessings that he received, he still turned his his back on God. He ended up abandoning the laws of God and straying away from the covenant, and built altars for other gods to worship them at the request of his 300 wives and his 700 concubines.
Okay, so Big Nick gave a pretty good recounting of the events there. I'm sure he got some stuff wrong because he always does. And if he did, point that out in the comments down below. Just, point it out, because why not? I don't really care, so I'm not even going to bother. But, fun little story. Notice, though, that story about Solomon takes a very weird turn. Solomon was the wisest ruler to ever live. Just the wisest a wise man can ever be. And yet, he totally was just like, all right, so I know this one God is the real one, but I'm just going to put up idols in his temples anyway, even though he said not to do that. And why not? I'm going to marry hundreds of women and have hundreds more as concubines, because I'm just so wise. Like, the fact that the Bible says King Solomon was the wisest ruler of all time should be enough to tell you that that whole book is just propaganda, like in support of Israel. That should be enough, shouldn't it? Like, it's pretty blatantly obvious that if he really did those things, he really wasn't that wise. Like, by what rationale are we calling Solomon the most wise? I would like to know. But I do know. I know the answer because I live in the real world, unlike Big Nick and people like him who take the stories very literal. It was propaganda. That's all it was. It was just propaganda.
This even led to child sacrifice, which God said he greatly hates in Deuteronomy 12:31. The abominable acts of abandoning God and worshiping other idols is what led the kingdom of Israel to be split into two. The Lord appeared to Solomon in 1 Kings 11:11-12, saying this, "Therefore the Lord said to Solomon, since this has been your practice, and you have not kept my covenant and my statutes that I have commanded you, I will surely tear the kingdom from you and will give it to your servant. Yet for the sake of David your father, I will not do it in your days, but I will tear it out of the hand of your son."
Can you feel the wisdom? Can anybody else feel the wisdom of Solomon just seeping through every word there?
The kingdom was then split in the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah. The reason this history is so significant to America is because we are on the verge of this nation splitting into two kingdoms as well. The kingdom of leftist Marxists and the kingdom of biblical conservatives. And this is because America has broken their covenant with God that they established in 1607. In 1607, an expedition to America was led by Pastor Robert Hunt, which led them to the shores of Virginia Beach. When they arrived to America, they dedicated the foundation of our country to Jesus. They planted a rough-hewn wooden cross which they brought from England and prayed this, "We do hereby dedicate this land and ourselves to reach the people within these shores with the gospel of Jesus Christ, and to raise up godly generations after us, and with these generations take the kingdom of God to all the earth. May this covenant of dedication remain to all generations, as long as this earth remains, and may this land, along with England, be evangelists to the world. May all who see this cross remember what we have done here, and may those who come here to inhabit join us in this covenant, and in this most noble work, that the holy scriptures may be fulfilled."
Anybody else notice that was supposed to have happened in 1607 and not 1776, and therefore would have nothing to do with the United States of America? Anybody else notice that? Because I feel like Big Nick might have skipped over that whole thing. The United States of America did not yet exist. But also, who cares what some random group of people did anyway? Like, you can do that today. I mean, you can literally go out, plant a cross, and dedicate this nation to Jesus. You can do that today. I know that because I've seen people do it. Doesn't work. Doesn't make a difference. I don't get why this is such a sticking point for these people. You take a random group of crazies and you're just like, well, I guess that settles it. America's Jesus's now. Like, no, that's not how that works.
Just like Israel was founded off of a covenant with the God of the Bible, America was founded in the same way. For the longest time, America has been the land of the free where God's righteousness was upheld. God takes covenants very serious, and the America that we see today is a visual representation of that covenant being broken, which was established in 1607. America now worships many idols, including money, sex, gluttony, virtually every single sin that is reprehensible in the eyes of God. And because of this, we do not have justice in this nation anymore. And the Trump trial, which is clearly political persecution, is a representation of the ancient demonic spirit that is in our world leaders in America that possess the satanic dictators, such as Mao Zedong, Joseph Stalin, and Adolf Hitler, who also took measures to imprison any political opponent that was a threat to the regime.
I told you he was coming with like the Stalin, Mao Zedong thing. I told you that's what they always do. That's not what's happening. That's not what's happening in America. If anything, it's more like, Mussolini with like an orange tan. But I digress. I digress because holy mother of everything unholy. This guy just they don't these people don't live in the real world. They live in some fantasy land. They when they think about history, they're not thinking about the realities of history. They're not thinking about the realities of what America is and what America was and where it came from. And I mean, geez, it's like they really think that everybody in America before like 1776 or 1860, whatever, it's like they think everybody before a certain date were all like super holy, righteous people, and then everybody after that's just become increasingly degenerate. But no, America has always been a mixed place, just like anywhere else. There's always been places that had these very mixed ideas of what is righteous and unrighteous, and America has always been diverse with its thought and its religion. There was never, at any point in time, except for maybe when like there was a handful of people here, where everybody agreed on what it was to be righteous and holy. But of course, in Big Nick's view, there was a time like that. In fact, everything was perfect until the Democrats came along or something like that. I don't know. I don't know what his standard would be there, but it's it's a view of history for people who live in fantasy. And I think the same thing is true of the common views of the Bible in this crowd, isn't it?
In the same way that the Biden administration is doing now. It's not about Republican or Democrat. This is about communism, and it's happening. The reason this ancient demon that fueled communism has now been given legal right over our nation is because God has been kicked out and replaced with many other false gods. This is why this corrupt trial against Trump is bigger than just a political figure, but it's the spiritual representation of disobeying God which leads a country into tyranny. The 33rd President of the United States explained it best when Harry Truman was quoted saying this: "The fundamental basis of this nation's laws was given to Moses on the Mount. If we don't have a proper fundamental moral background, we will finally end up with a totalitarian government which does not believe in rights for anybody except the state." It's chilling to think that this quote from almost 100 years ago is coming to fruition with this Trump trial.
Republicans don't understand what communism is, and that's been apparent for a very long time. Big Nick, of course, upholds this tradition with flying colors, obviously. But he adds a new little twist to it. I have never heard anyone say that communism is a demon. Now, I have heard people say that, like, Joseph Stalin was demonic or whatever, but I have never heard someone say that communism itself, an ideology, a concept, an idea, is a demon. And let's be obvious about something here. I don't know why, but we always have to do the obvious thing. So let's do the obvious thing and just point something out. Communism is not when president do bad thing. Communism is an actual political ideology. Yes, there was repression, there was terror. That was a part of being a communist leader, it seems like. But that is not the ideology itself. The ideology itself is about collectivization. The ideology is about equality, stuff like that. I mean, there is nothing in communism that greatly offends me as an ideology. In fact, I mean, Christians should love it. The early church, in fact, was very communist oriented. And in fact, Christians very often do love it. They just don't know they love it. Here's a good example. Before I moved recently, I was talking to my mom, and she was talking about, the end of society, because she's always expecting that. She's a prepper. She's a doomer. She thinks society is going to collapse any day, and it's going to be like the road or something. And she was saying, like, oh, well, what are you going to do when the world ends? And it's like, probably die. I mean, I think that's probably what's going to happen to most people if something like that does happen. But she was saying that she was going to get together with her community and they were going to agree to share everything and work as a collective. And I was like, dude, that's literally communism. You're describing communism right now. She didn't believe me. Had to look it up. And she did. And of course, I was right. Find another definition. Still, I'm correct. More definitions. I'm once more correct. But naturally, she denies it. She's like, that's not what communism is. Well, shit, tell that to the Soviets.
And once again shows us that the tyranny of the kingdom of the leftist Marxist movement that's happening here in America is a response to abandoning God. It is not Trump that they're after, but it is the freedom of Americans and eventually Christians that they wish to destroy. Trump is merely their poster child for the Antichrist hatred that they wish to impose on everyone who doesn't submit to their demonic agenda. And they've proven that they will go to immense measures to carry out their diabolical plan, including composing a kangaroo court on a former president who won't submit to their demonic agenda. This is why we need to return back to Jesus Christ as American citizens and return back to the covenant that we made with him. The reason that I made this video is not to be a political commentator, but to show you the clear dangers that we face as a country if we continue to abandon God and worship other gods.
Well, thanks for that, Big Nick. As always, happy to see ya. Happy to see those luscious eyebrows on display. So, for the rest of you, thanks for coming, thanks for being here, and I hope you have a great one. Don't let the demon of communism get a hold of you.